What's up, BikeRumor fans? I'm here with the all-new SRAM Force AXS 4330, or what is inevitably going to become known as Force Wide, whether they like it or not. Sorry guys, but that's kind of what we're going to call it, Force AXS Wide. So it's a group. However, every part is sold separately because you can mix and match, and really it's almost best to think of this as two separate systems, the front and the rear. I've got my notes because there's a lot of numbers here, so I'm just going to use my cheat sheets instead of having to keep doing a bunch of takes where you don't see. But we're going to start at the front because the front derailleur needs to work with this crankset. In the back, it's a little bit more flexible, but if you want to run this new gearing, you will need that new front derailleur. So up front, you have a new front derailleur and 4330 cranks. And yes, this crankset is completely new. The crank spindle gets pushed out 5 millimeters wider. So that's a 5 millimeter increase in the Q factor, 2.5 millimeters per side, which means the chain line is pushed out 2.5 millimeters as well to 47.5 millimeters. The whole point of this was to gain tire clearance for bikes that want to run bigger, fatter tires, and we'll get to the numbers in just a second on that. Let's talk about this front derailleur for a second. So the front derailleur sits a little bit further off. It requires a wider dub bottom bracket, or at least more spacers, about 2.5 millimeters per side if you do the math. It's dub only, so there's not going to be a GXP version, which means no Trek BB90 compatibility, but otherwise there's bottom bracket options for most any other standard out there. At the moment, there's no power meter because this uses a new, smaller 94 millimeter BCD, and that's down from the 107 millimeter BCD on the rest of the AXS cranksets. However, they did just acquire PowerTap, so you can run those new P2 power meter pedals if you want to put a power meter on this particular crankset. Front derailleur is set off of the frame about 2.5 millimeters more, and the whole point of doing this, making everything wider and sticking out further, was to add tire clearance because, let's face it, our gravel bikes are getting more aggressive. A lot of us want to run really big tires, and so the original AXS group had very, very tight clearance, mainly aimed at being used for road bikes. The next generation, what was AXS, bumped it out just a little bit, kind of by repositioning the battery, and that added another couple millimeters, opened it up so that you could comfortably run 700 by 40 millimeter tires. Now with this new version, because it's pushed out 2.5 millimeters more, they claim it's compatible with 700 by 45 millimeter tires or 650B by 2.1 inch mountain bike tires. I actually mounted up all the derailleurs I have because I've got the first generation Red eTap, I've got Red AXS, and now this new Force Wide. So this is what they look like. You can see with the original, there is virtually no clearance for these 700 by 40 mil tires that I've got mounted up here now. With the new SRAM AXS, you can see there's definitely a few more millimeters clearance, like I would comfortably run that. But now with this Force Wide, it opens up even more, letting me run bigger, fatter tires if I wanted to. The derailleur uses their yaw cage shaping, so there's no need for trim, and in my experience, it's been really, really good at avoiding chain rub. Of course, with the electronic group, when you're in the small chainring, it won't let you into the smallest cogs on the cassette, and that's to avoid a bad cross-chaining setup. All right, let's move to the back of the bike, and then I'll explain where and how you can mix and match parts between these and the other AXS parts, because you have to do a little bit of math, but it's super easy, don't worry. So in the back, you have a new 1036 cassette, and this is a one-piece cluster with a pin construction. So it's not the ultralight machines from a single piece of metal cassette like you'll find at Red level, but it's reasonably light and it works on their XDR driver bodies. So you just slide the whole thing on, bolt it down, good to go. The rear derailleur is new also, and if you'll notice on the back it says Max 36 tooth, and that is because it's designed to work specifically with this cassette. Now, that said, you can run it with their smaller 1033s and 1028 cassettes as well. So if I were gonna buy one derailleur to work with a AXS system, I would probably go with this one because it's gonna give me the option of running the biggest cassette they make for it. And then if you wanna go bigger, that's when you would go to the Eagle mountain bike derailleurs and just run a mountain bike cassette. This is where a little bit of math comes in, but again, it's easy, you'll see why. So the rear derailleur has a max of 39 tooth difference, and what that means is if you take the difference between the smallest and the biggest cassettes here. So on a 1036, that's going to be a 26 difference. And then you add that to the 13 tooth difference in the front because you have a 4330. So 26 plus 13 is 39. So that means that this setup, the way it's done now, is the biggest gap between differences that this rear derailleur will work with. Fortunately, all of the SRAM AXS cranksets use a 13 tooth jump. So that means that you can use this cassette and this rear derailleur with any of the other SRAM cranksets. So if you just wanted to add more range to your road bike but keep bigger gearing up front, you can do that all the way up to their 5037, or run it as a 1x. So you could run this if you typically live where it's flatter and you just want to run a 1x with more range than a road cassette. You could put this on there and this will work just fine with a 1x setup. So that's the group. If you bought all 4 pieces, the cassette, the rear derailleur, front derailleur, and crankset, then you're looking at about $14.50 US for everything. Full pricing, all the actual weights, photos, complete specs, and everything will be in the post on BikeRumor. We'll have a link to that in the description. But now let's go take it for a quick ride and show you a little bit of the shifting action on the trails. The new Force AXS wide range group is aimed at people who live in really hilly areas or just climb a lot and just want some easier gearing. So yes, you will need a new front derailleur if you want to use the crankset, those lower gears, or you'll need a new rear derailleur if you want to use the wide range cassette, or just add it all up. But the cool thing is it is modular, so you can add that front system to your existing road drivetrain, or you can add the rear derailleur and wider cassette to your existing road crankset and setup, or a 1x, and get a little bit more range. As far as the shifting goes, it's the same as what SRAM's been doing, so it uses the flat top chain and it shifts pretty crisp and pretty clean. It's got the paddle shifting up front with the extra texture on the shifter paddles, so it's easy to use. And I actually like the AXS paddles better for gravel because there's a little bit more finger clearance for when you're braking and need to just kind of like feather the brakes, but it's also maintain a really good grip on the bars descending some rough, gnarly roads. So let's turn up here and get on a climb. We'll see how that rear mech shifts for us. Our first look at the SRAM Force AXS wide range group. If you like this video and you want more great tech coverage and reviews, be sure to hit subscribe, hit like, ring that little bell so that you will get notifications every time we post something new. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you next time.